and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and the month that this episode is being released is April of 2025, and it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We have yet to have had Clove Alliance on the podcast, who is this area's actually not just Kankakee County, but also into Iroquois and Ford counties as well. It's an organization that fights against such things. And I'm happy to welcome the organization's executive director, Tracey Noe Slach.
Yes. Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've been in your position for how long now?
Now, 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
It's 11 years this summer. Yeah.
Man, that is so hard to believe.
Yeah. Time goes by fast.
It really does. And a lot of people probably remember KC CASA, which is Clove Alliance.
Yes, it is.
But that's the old name. Clove Alliance is the new name. How old is Clove Alliance altogether then?
37 years. Yep. And we did the name change 4 years ago.
Yeah. I was thinking it's been 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
And why the name change?
It was right after COVID. We have always served Kankakee County, and then we just celebrated serving Iroquois County for 25 years last year. When we started serving Iroquois County, it's not Kankakee. So we started calling our services Iroquois Sexual Assault Services. And about 7 years ago, we started serving Ford County. So we're like, we really need a brand that unifies what we do. And it was right after COVID. So it was kind of like we can reemerge as this new entity and be cohesive for the 3 counties that we serve. And it was great. We worked with a branding partner, and the Clove represents our core services. So counseling, advocacy, and prevention. And then the 4th, ultimately, the survivor. So, and then the alliance, meaning we have to come together to end sexual violence in our communities.
I love that.
Yeah.
I guess I never thought about the clove
shape,
part of it. That's really cool how that all ties together. Walk us through a little bit of the history.
Yeah. So we serve anyone that's been affected by sexual violence and they're impacted individuals. So like for our counseling services, that could mean siblings, spouses, partners, best friends, to really help survivors in that healing journey so they have somebody to walk alongside them. And then, we have our advocacy services as well. So that includes medical and legal advocacy. So we respond to the hospital if someone's been assaulted. Our advocates also walk alongside a survivor through those court proceedings. Sadly, those court proceedings can take a really long time.
They often do, unfortunately.
Yes.
They expand into years, it seems like.
Maybe 3 years sometimes. So they're able to follow that court case for that survivor so they don't have to miss work. They can give those updates. We also help, during trial time. And it's just a huge benefit for that survivor to have that support and empowerment. And then, they also help with orders of protection if those are needed as well. And then, our community engagement and education. I feel like we're in the other end of our mission is to end sexual violence in our communities.
So you have to educate.
And we work with Aaron's Law, which is body safety training that's age appropriate. So we do that free of charge for all of the schools in the area that have us in. So really busy in the community as well. And I feel like our team just does a really good job of creating that awareness because, 1 in 3 women have been affected by sexual violence and 1 in 7 men. So chances are, if you or yourself haven't been affected, someone
those
a
are
loved one.
Yeah, those are big numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, 1 in 3.
1 in 3. Yeah.
And that covers a gamut of things. I mean, we often usually think of the extremes.
Yeah.
Right. But there's things that go beyond the extremes. There's the things that are maybe it never became a physical altercation, but it was all mental.
Yeah.
And that sometimes that leaves an even bigger scar than it does with anything that could have been physical.
Exactly. So like stalking, something along those lines. So yeah, we help with all of that.
I was thinking too is like, where does the funding?
Oh yeah, I can talk about
Where
that.
does the funding come from for this?
So we're funded with state funds and then federal funds as well. We are one of the rape crisis centers in Illinois that's funded through the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So they are kind of like our entity or lead entity that we work with. And we get funding through VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Act. It's not taxpayer dollars. And then state funding. And then we have like Attorney General funding and United Way funding and, a lot of local support as well, which is all necessary to be able to fulfill our mission.
Yeah, you're constantly having fundraisers too, which is something you need as well.
Yeah.
And everything that we've talked about so far, there's so much going on there.
Yes.
And a lot of the things, the lines get crossed and it turns into the spider web. At least that's what just came into my mind as you're telling me all these things. How do you keep that straight when it comes to because these sexual assault cases can be so complex?
Yeah, I feel like I have a great team. I have some amazing program directors that lead alongside me in our agency forward. And I feel like it's just really keeping the survivor in our community foremost in our minds. What are the needs that our survivors are presenting with? Like during COVID, it was, hey, I lost my job. My hours were cut, X, Y, and Z, and, kind of making sure that we're adapting with what survivors are needing. As of late, our advocacy department's really grown. It's our largest department. And, our advocates have caseloads, maybe 20, 30 people because they're following those cases, for so long. And also being able to, make sure we're responding to orders of protection or the hospital. And then really working, for counseling, what do people need, making sure that we're adapting. So we do counseling in person, virtual, and by phone, so.
I imagine, as we're talking about this, I just imagine like this huge group of people you have working for you, but it's actually not.
No.
There's not like hundreds of people working for you.
It would be great. But yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's actually, what, is it 10 to 20?
No, we have about 20. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and for 3 counties, I mean.
Yeah. So we have one advocate who works in our Watseka office, and she covers Watseka and Ford. And then all of our other staff is in the Kankakee office. And then we just travel throughout the counties. Yeah. Last year we did 33,000 miles in travel. So, yeah.
Well, between the 3 counties, I mean, there's a lot of rural land to cover in those counties, especially in Iroquois and Ford, even more so.
Yeah. We're in a second year of our strategic plan, and that's one of our initiatives is making sure that we're serving those underserved in rural communities. It's, so often it can be overlooked or just bypassed, just for capacity reasons. So just being really intentional that we are serving all counties and all areas that need our services, and that outreach component too, making sure that people know that we're here and we're ready to serve you.
Yeah. And I think, this episode is just super important on just getting back to education, with April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What are the things that you're usually teaching the general public about sexual assault during this month or just on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think people that maybe haven't been affected, they don't know how prevalent it is. So a lot of times, if we're at like an outreach event, hey, take our information because even though you may need it, someone in your life may need it in the future. And just making sure people know that our services are available. And then I think it's making sure that people feel supported in coming forward. There's a lot of stigma and shame that, I feel like our society perpetuates with survivors of sexual violence. So just making sure that, we hear you, we believe you. We are going to believe you no matter what. So, and that's not normally the common common theme that survivors face. They, the stat that always has stuck with me, that as a child, we serve lots of children. About half of our clients are children, sadly. And a child usually tells someone 7 times about abuse or inappropriate touching or grooming 7 times before they're believed. And so it's just...
And is that because you think because they're children?
I think it's because they're children.
The adults don't necessarily believe them right away.
And there's like that stigma of like, oh, it's, someone you don't know. It's common for children. It's 90% someone that is a trusted member, not maybe of their family, but of their circle.
Yes.
And
it doesn't have to be family.
Exactly.
It could be anyone in that circle, whether they're on the outer edge or closer to the middle. But I would say, that's a big misconception. It's usually not just some random stranger.
Yeah, exactly.
It's usually someone that the person knows.
And so that's something like definitely, educating children, and then, our teens and young adults as well, working with healthy relationships and consent. And then, just a common thing I'm asked is like, so what would you tell, if somebody tells you that they've been, experienced sexual violence? I believe you. I'm here for you. Like that is, I think many of the survivors we work with don't have that support, and it's really sad.
How many times has it been, where you've seen cases to where it turns out the victim was lying? I mean, how many times is that?
Never.
It's never happened.
No.
Okay. Because I know that also.
That's always,
Right. That comes up as well, right?
Sexual violence is a very underreported crime because of the stigma. And, we have great networks and support within Kankakee County and Iroquois and Ford. We have 3 sexual assault response teams, which brings together our, Clove, our state's attorneys, law enforcement, probation, medical, so the hospitals. And we come together every month, talk about what can we do better? What can we do better for response? It really sets our services apart because other counties don't have that. And we're really working on making sure that when a survivor comes forward, that response is a good response.
It's handled properly.
It's handled properly. They're supported.
Going back to, what you said about, we're talking about kids and saying it takes them 7 times before they're actually believed and things like that. I mean, what's something we can do for, education for our kids? You were talking about some type of special education about.
Yeah, so Aaron's Law is, I don't remember how many states it's in, but it's more or less, it's a mandate that schools have to provide body safety, age-appropriate body safety education every year. And so we have presentations, really for young to high school, college, depending on, of course, what age and what maybe needs are, with technology and things like that. But really just making sure that, they know what is safe touch, what is consent, that you can say no, and just really reiterating those things. And often it's the first time that they're hearing this information. So then we get a lot of disclosures in school as well, because it's the first time that they're hearing that, well, I'm not supposed to be touched there. Oh, I have been touched there. And then that leads to that disclosure. And then we're able to help that child.
Has there been a rise in, cases and things happening in schools that you know of? And do you think it's related to the education piece that's going on?
I really haven't seen like a rise. We actually saw a rise during COVID, which was surprising. We were doing virtual body safety presentations, which was just like outside of the norm for us.
Sure.
But students felt comfortable messaging versus maybe coming up after the presentation. So that is, more the rise that we saw as of late was during COVID. Okay. But yeah, we still have lots of students that will disclose.
What are some of those things that's in that that teaching in Aaron's Law?
Like I don't per se do
I know you
presentations.
don't do it. I know you can't do everything.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, depending on what age group it is, it's, we use in the young grades, it's called Max and Molly. They're two bears. They wear swimsuits. And, hey, this is good touch. This is bad touch. And then it kind of goes a little bit more in depth into, what should you say if some, and kind of teaching kids how to have a voice. Also doing a lot more of like that empowerment type of training as well. Confidence building and things like that as they're getting older. And then, like February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
So then, also in high schools, doing like, we do a lot of fun, different things, but like coffee and consent, and I feel like, consent is something that's, I feel like more widely spoke about and taught now maybe than like 5-10 years ago. Like what is consent and what what is active consent?
What does consent look like in the 21st century?
Exactly.
I mean, no, I'm asking you, what does it look like?
Yes.
I mean, just a simple should people be like verbally asking?
Well, I mean, I think it's we kind of talk about, can consent be given if someone's completely intagicated? No.
I mean, I was always taught in school, no.
Yeah, like exactly.
That was, in DARE or not, maybe not DARE, but in, health class in high school, they're like, that doesn't.
Yeah. But it's also, the absence of no doesn't always mean yes. So it's, there's a couple great videos. There's like one with like tea, and, talking about like, well, if they make you tea and they offer you tea and then they don't want, so it's, I feel like a great way to kind of explain how consent can change as well. If the person said yes before, it doesn't mean that they're always going to say yes. And that's also okay, so.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of where it gets into, marriage, and you can still say no, even if you're married. Just because you're married now doesn't mean it's open season whenever you want.
Yeah.
That, I think that's something that there's blurred lines on that. If my child comes to me and tells me something, what should I do? If they say, hey, I've been touched, or whatever it might be, what is the first thing that I should do?
I mean, my thought is to call the police. They would definitely start that process. We do have parents that call more or less like with that inappropriate touch. Maybe it's like kid on kid, young children, is it, appropriate? And so like we can definitely field those questions. But if it's anything above that, our first step is, to definitely call the police. And then they would start getting those that ball rolling if that's what the family wanted. And then additionally too, if a child is disclosed sexual assault and abuse, we can definitely provide services. So they don't have to per se have a police report. They don't have to go to the hospital. Yeah.
Is it ever too late?
No.
To come forward with?
No. We see a lot of adults that have been victims of childhood sexual assault and abuse. And, additionally with our services, they're victim-centered and survivor-led. So the survivor kind of leads their journey. We have a lot of times, a survivor will use our services a year and then it's 5 years later. Hey, I'm in a new relationship. A lot of stuff's coming back up. I need support in this. So yeah, come back for services. So it's great that our services are always available. There's no like time limit. And yeah, and a lot of times too, it's that trauma comes back up in adulthood, and it's focused on their childhood. And yeah, we're definitely able to help with that. So
if there is someone in our life, or maybe it even, is someone listening to this that's dealing with it directly and not indirectly, but what can, from the outside, what does some of that trauma look like, even though the person is not disclosing that, hey, this thing happened to me?
Yeah.
What are some of those warning signs?
I feel like, for like an adult, you're thinking, I think, sometimes they become more withdrawn. They can, start using alcohol or substance, depression, PTSD, all of those type of things can come up. Trouble sleeping, irritability. I feel like any of those type of trauma type symptoms, can start presenting themselves.
Yeah. And with kids, is it similar, or
I would
see
say
a little different behavior?
Yeah, I would say, depending on the age, I feel like kids is a long,
it is. That's a big category.
I feel like, you kind of talked to about adults, like what can we do for our children? And we really say, like, use the correct terms for anatomy. I think that's a big piece when training for body safety. But I think, like, definitely listening to your kids. I think, especially small children, if they have a voice, and making sure that that voice is heard. I feel like that's where sometimes kids can get brushed off, like, Why
is it such a big deal to use the correct words in anatomy versus like, the words that aren't
fun,
correct? The fun words. Yeah. Well, not fun, but they sound a little silly.
Yeah. And I think, I think that kind of uncomfortableness is where people started using the incorrect terms, because we're not, as a society, maybe comfortable with using those correct terms. But it's so important. And then, like, I wouldn't say like an investigation, but, if a child's calling a private area a cookie, well, we don't know what that is. So it's really important that those correct terms are known for children, because then they're able they can identify it, what's going on. Yeah.
Right. You don't have to sift through all the different variations of, okay, what is a cookie?
Yeah.
When you say cookie, what are you saying?
What does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Because I know sometimes that's questioned as well, where parents are like, well, I don't want to teach them that word yet, or, what that is yet. But there is a reason.
There is a reason
for it. And a good one at that.
Yeah.
What can I do to support that person in my life that is going through a traumatic experience with sexual assault? What is something that, because that is also very hard as well, to know how to support that person.
Yeah. I feel like really focusing that you believe them. You don't have any doubt in it. I feel like, our families, our friends, our circles can know, like, when, oh, well, what were you wearing? I feel like that we used to have a display, and we still have it. It's or what were you wearing display. And it's truly what the clothing that our survivors had been wearing from children to adults. And it's, it has nothing to do with what you were wearing. So just making sure that they have no doubt that you believe them, and that you are here for them. Since you know about Clove Alliance, you can definitely, hey, this is support within our community that's free. And then just, what do you need? Do I just need to sit with you? I think, it's so hard when somebody tells you that, to want to, like, well, do you want to go to law enforcement? Do you want to do this? And just, hey, I'm here for you.
Yes. Because sometimes I can only imagine how many times that's come across in Clove Alliance, to where you actually, maybe you don't go to law enforcement right away, right? Yeah. Because maybe the person is in such a frantic mindset at that point, where they just can't find that calmness to where their mind can clearly just absorb everything that's just happened. And you don't want to louse up a potential case, I would imagine.
Yeah,
too.
and we support the survivor. So it's whatever the survivor wants. So if they never want to talk to law enforcement,
then they don't have to.
Yeah, we support them in that. And, kind of talking about how, survivors explain what happened. That's all trauma, like it's what they say, like when, we go through our day to day, it's kind of like just a file cabinet and everything gets put in proper order. And when something traumatic, like victimization happens, that file cabinet is just literally blown up. It's not
organized.
And it's not organized. So I feel like that's where when somebody tells you or if somebody were to ever tell you, hey, this happened and their story doesn't add up, don't question it because it's the trauma talking. I feel like that's a common thing that we go into is, well, they didn't say it in the correct order. They said this happened. It's the trauma talking. And, us working within it day to day, we know that. But I feel like the general public, that's something and it makes it sound like the person's making it up or lying, and that is not the case.
So does it eventually come, have you seen it to where it eventually comes to a point with survivors where they've gone through enough, let's say, just treatment and support and things like that to where their story does get put together and it's concise and it's cohesive?
Yeah. And the great thing for us is that's really not our side. We really, we try to limit the amount of re-victimization. Okay. So like we don't want them to have to retell their story if they don't want to. Yeah. So I feel like, throughout counseling and throughout our support, I feel like we can help them if that's what, they're trying to work towards, but I feel like the great thing about our services is that, you tell us how much you want us to tell us and we're going to work with that, know. Mm-hmm.
So besides, going back to the whole, what were you wearing question, obviously that's something you never want to ask. And, you made it clear earlier, it shouldn't matter what you're wearing, regardless of whether the other person thinks it's appropriate or not. It's not an invitation for unwanted behavior.
Yeah.
What are some other things you feel like that are definite and definitive, like don't do this if you're sitting down with someone who's telling you
Yeah, I feel like definitely putting I want to say putting the blame on the perpetrator. I feel like sexual violence, people are like, it's about sex. No, it's about power and control. It doesn't have really anything to do with sex. And making sure that, trying to ease any guilt that survivor may have and making sure that we're putting blame on the person that committed this crime. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happens, and I know every situation is different, but let's say, a person comes to you first time, says, hey, I was sexually assaulted. What happens, and just kind of the general.
Yeah. So just to mention too, we have a 24-hour crisis hotline. So we can definitely help with any of those questions and support. If it's a recent assault, we would say the option is you could go to the hospital for a sexual assault evidence kit done by a SANE. So that's a sexual assault nurse examiner. That window is, probably 7-10 days of the assault.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah. And that is like a forensic exam. So we can be with the survivor the whole time, provide support. And even before that, give someone the options. So, usually it's like a hotline call for our crisis hotline. Get that and say, the option, you could go to the hospital. You could choose not to go to the hospital, but also just say, like, if you want to preserve any evidence, like this would be the time you would need to go. There's a lot of options with reporting now in the hospital. You can get a kit done and you can decide you don't want law enforcement to pick it up.
Oh, wow.
So it can be done and retained, and you can think about it.
So
for
where
a
does
little
that
bit.
kit go then?
I think right now how like the hospitals keep them for so long, and
Okay.
and then I think they still go to Illinois State Police, but there's been some changes with that. Or they can have the kit released and then start that process as well. It can be that they just want to have an order of protection done. Hey, I want to be safe, and this is what I think my next course would be. They may not want to do any of that.
Yes.
And that's my team is amazing, and I think that's can be so hard in this work is we may be like, oh, well, you should do this, and this. And we step back, and it's whatever they want. We present all options, and they can choose. And we're there for whatever they choose down that path.
I would imagine that can also be overwhelming, though.
100%. Yeah.
And how hard is it to get an order of protection? Because I think some people sometimes shy away from it because they think it's so hard to get. No. But is it?
I feel like, every case is, different.
I know.
But I feel like, our advocates are there to help fill that order with the survivor. We also have an attorney. We are one of the few in the state that have a legal services attorney. And that's been a huge help with those order of protections. And we've had a lot of them. We have great success with having them granted because our advocates are not attorneys, and so they're not able to speak up in court. So that's been a great thing that we've been able to offer.
So the attorney is for the survivor.
For us, yeah.
To speak up, and that's great.
And help through that process.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't feel like they're hard, and please call us if
sure. I was just curious, because I can only imagine how many times that comes up.
Yeah, we actually have a courthouse phone that calls our hotline.
Oh, wow.
So
okay. So that's pretty serious then.
Yeah.
And then from there, where would that person go?
For services.
In the Clove.
Yeah.
What would be the next step?
Then it's, referrals to our agency. We kind of treat all of our programs kind of, I don't want to say separately, also to protect that confidentiality. A survivor may need advocacy services, and they may not need them. They may want counseling services, or they may not. So it's whatever, giving them all of those options, and then they are able to decide where they want to go.
Is the counseling in-house or is it outsourced to other counseling groups?
No, it's we do all of our counseling in-house. I feel like it's exceptional counseling. I feel like people are like, oh, it's free. And I'm like, but it's exceptional because we're so knowledgeable with sexual violence.
Right,
and
that's what
helping,
you're there for.
Exactly. And working with survivors through that, also, I think it's just unique too, that we're available when they need us. Like I said before, we have survivors that are, in a good place, and then something happens in their life and something triggered them or brought up their victimization, and they're able to call us again, and we're able to get them back in and meet them where they are and what they need help with.
When it comes to sexual assault, what are some forms of sexual violence, sexual assault? I guess there's all. Sometimes it's not as serious as an assault. But what are some of the things that get brushed under the rug, but really it's like, no, like that's actually this. You should do something about it, or you should seek help or whatever. What are some of those other forms of the obvious ones? Yeah,
I think sexual harassment, is something that's easily, I don't want to say brushed under the rug, but
it can be.
It can be. And I feel like, then you're talking maybe employment. So, how is my employer going to retaliate if I bring this up, which that's illegal.
Yes.
And we do offer free sexual harassment training for businesses. It is a requirement that in the state of Illinois that you are doing that for your employees. So I do feel like that is a really big piece that that support maybe isn't in, in a corporate setting. And so realizing, but it's still wrong and it should not be happening. I think another thing too is grooming behaviors, especially for children. I don't want to say it can be brushed under, but it may not be as obvious. And I feel like with this, in a digital world that we're in, protecting our kids is getting harder and harder to do.
Yes. And what does some of that grooming look like? I'm glad you brought that up too, because there are some techniques of grooming to where it doesn't look like grooming, but then, let's say that person's been doing that grooming for a while, then it gets to some other serious things. And then that's when the red flags start to go off. But, those initial ones.
Yeah. I can say I feel like grooming, it can be sending nude pictures, I feel like is a thing that we've been seeing a lot of, definitely touching and things like that. But then for, I would say more teens, but getting new shoes and different things that a teen wants in favor of, hey, if I get you this, will you send me this? And then you have kind of like that pornography type of thing that's being held over a child to say well, no, I have this picture now. I'm going to tell everybody. And I think that can just be really difficult to navigate to as, parents and trusted loved ones in a child's family. I'm trying to think of what other I feel like there's a lot of different grooming techniques.
Sure.
But
but maybe I was just trying to think of if there's some that just maybe are used a lot that people don't think about,
Yeah, I think it's just that connection piece. I think for cases that we've dealt with, the perpetrator does a really good job of building a connection and a relationship with a child that they feel safe to tell this person really anything. And when the abuser is telling them, don't tell anybody, the child doesn't question it then. And then that's where, it becomes the abuse then is, I don't say full circle, but it's a lot harder for a parent to get involved then.
Yeah. Right.
And then that's what it could be over the course of years too.
Oh, yes.
So that relationship's really formed between the perpetrator and the victim.
Okay. What are some other pieces that Clove is heavily focused on with educating the area, specifically the 3 counties with sexual assault?
Yeah. I feel like the biggest piece is just knowing about our services. Sexual assault, abuse, violence isn't oh, great, I want to talk about that.
Wonderful. Let's sit down and talk about it.
We now have a therapy dog at Clove.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Buckeye. And so we kind of joke, but it's if Buckeye's at an event, people do come up and talk to us. So I feel like just the talking about it, and that's why Sam is so important. Sexual Assault Awareness Month. That's our acronym.
Sam, right. Sam is the acronym.
Yeah.
When you hear that, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah. And but just making sure that, our community knows about our services and knows that sexual violence is so prevalent that, someone you may have known or yourself have been affected.
Right. You said 1 in 3 for women and 1 in 7 for men.
Mm-hmm.
So both are high numbers.
Yeah, very high.
Yeah. And then is there a number for children, or does that just kind of fall in?
I think, no, I don't have it. Our client base, I would say probably over the last 5 years is usually about half children to half adults. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We should mention too, talking about SAM or Sexual Assault Awareness Month, if you're listening to this before any of the special events that Clove has going on, people can obviously look those up at clovealliance.org or your social media accounts. Are there any of those specific events that you want to talk about?
I'll talk about we have our art show, which is next week. And, but that's just been a great community event. We have over 150 pieces of art. It's definitely something we do in the schools. So we get a lot of art from kids and we, of course, adults as well. But that's been a great event that we have at the museum. And I feel like it's great to see families supporting their children. And it's our 5th year doing it. So it's a great event. And then we have our volunteer training coming up. We offer that twice a year. There's different capacities and to serve at Clove, but the volunteer training is required to be able to serve at Clove, but you can help staff our hotline. Our hotline's 24/7, 365 days a year. So we always need help with that. But then also all of our special events that we do and outreach is so important. So all of that training would help get a person equipped to handle all of that.
Well, Tracey, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all you do and the entire staff at Clove Alliance as well. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
That concludes this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. Please tap that subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Murr Music Studio for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name or business announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, KCC's Office of Continuing Education and Business Partnerships, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Edward Jones Financial Advisor Adam Elroy, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, Nana's Bakery, and Stafari West Avenue. Kankakee Podcast is produced by Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. You can learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll. This river